We want to welcome everyone to the third meeting of the House Transportation Committee for this session, and it's time for us to begin this meeting. So I'd ask you to please turn off your cell phones, turn them on vibrate, and take your seats. Do any of the members have any guests that they would like to recognize? Seeing none, Madam Secretary. No, you got one.
I do.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. No, I'd like to recognize Emily Dennison. She's shadowing Representative Miles this week, but she is from Owensboro, and she is working, I do believe, as a project manager on the I-69 project. So I wanted to welcome her to the committee.
Okay. Very good. Welcome. We're glad to have you. And any other members? If not, Madam Secretary, if you could please call the roll.
Representative Branscombe.
Here.
Representative Bridges. Here. Representative Elliott. Representative Fleming.
Present.
Representative Hale.
Present.
Representative Hebron.
Present.
Representative Hodgson.
Here.
Representative Huff.
Here.
Representative Imes. Here. Representative Lewis.
Here.
Representative McCool.
Here.
Representative Neighbors.
Here.
Representative Palumbo.
Here.
Representative Roberts.
Here.
Representative Smith. Here. Representative Swan.
Here.
Representative Tackett Lafferty. Representative Thomas.
Present.
Representative Upchurch.
Here.
Representative Wesley.
Here.
Representative Williams.
Here.
Vice Chair Dixon.
Here.
Chairman Blanton.
It appears we have a quorum present, and we are duly constituted to do business. At this time, Chairman Blanton is at the table. If you could identify yourself and your guests with you for the record, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Blanton with the 92nd District, and I'll allow Chad to introduce himself.
I'm Chad LaRue, the Executive Director for the Kentucky Association of Highway Contractors.
Thank you. And so House Bill 201 is related to highway work, zones, and making an appropriation, therefore, is before us right now. I do understand there is a committee substitute, Mr. Chairman.
That is correct.
Motion on the sub.
I have a motion on the sub. And second? Second. All those in favor of the sub say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Committee sub is adopted and before us. Mr. Chairman, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for allowing me to be here today to present this very important piece of legislation for our highway construction workers. This issue came about when a very fine, young, upstanding man who was a neighbor of mine was working in a work zone, and in November of 2019, he tragically lost his young life. Along with another friend that day, and his name is Jared Helton. Fine young man in our community. What a great loss it was to his family and to each of us. And so when his parents contacted me, I sought out transportation as to what we could do to improve our work zones, if they had any suggestions or ideas of how we may make it safer for our highway workers to work, to do their job, and feel safe in doing so. And transportation had already been working on a lot of issues of how we may go about something like this prior to me even contacted them. And so with that, they came up with this. I filed this bill a couple years ago for the first time. Chad contacted me with the highway contractors back this past summer and said, hey, that's a good bill. That's going to protect our employees out here. Can we continue to move forward? And that's what we're doing here today. This bill would be known as the Jared Lee Helton Act for this young man's honor and remembrance, and doing something to try and spare another family from a tragic loss. As a matter of fact, just recently we had another highway contractor here in Kentucky lose his life during his work on a road construction project. So what this bill does is it would install, it would put in place what is known as automated speed enforcement devices or speed cameras. And these speed cameras would be put into place on a pilot project beginning in January 24, going through the end of 25. And it would allow for the automated detection of speeders coming through these selected work zones throughout our state that the Transportation Cabinet, in conjunction with the highway contractors, deemed would be a good location to put these in an effort to slow down traffic as they come through these work zones. The cameras would take a picture of the driver and take a picture of the license plate as well, and they would be signage before you enter into these work zones indicating that these cameras were present. That is then reported to the Transportation Cabinet for a fine to be issued through the Transportation Cabinet for $75. The monies collected from this fines would be used to, one, pay for the automated speed device in this program, and any excessive monies would go into the workforce workforce safety zone. The committee sub would say that these would only operate or be enforceable when there's actually workers in the work zone. That was an issue some people wanted to see in there. It does give a little bit of latitude for speed in the legislation. It provides an appeal process for those that feel like that they were not the ones or they weren't speeding. It does provide a appeal process.
Motion on the bill.
All right, I have a motion on the bill from Representative Fleming and a second from
I have a
Representative
question.
Huff. Are there any questions? Representative Hodgson?
Question, mentioning your committee sub language there about when there are workers, a bona fide worker is present, it would not be applicable. How would the motorist know that? And what is the motorist's defense if they allege that there was no worker present when they were issued the citation by the computer?
First of all, the motorist would not know that when they first enter in. So it's very possible and probable that a photograph would be captured. However, the Transportation Cabinet would be communicating with the highway contractors to know what hours of the day, and if there's any citations outside of that time issued that workers were in the work zone, then there would be no citations sent to those drivers.
Is it an acceptable defense for a driver to say that there was no worker present when they passed through that work zone?
As long as they can prove that, that would be a part of the appeal process that transportation would handle, and I would think yes.
All right. Any other member seeking a question? Go ahead. Representative Thomas.
So this will be done internally. We're not going to third party out the speed cameras or anything. We're a lot of times, I think, in Representative Hale, the school bus was actually a third party service. We'll be using this internally, won't we?
I would want to defer to KYTC to see if they've addressed that. I know the technology will obviously be third party. I, as far as the highway contractor side, I'm not clear if that's been specified as far as the technology to be operated in-house or if it would be third-partied.
And I have someone that can answer that question.
All right.
Jason Sawala, Deputy State Highway Engineer for KYTC. So the language in the bill asks us to establish a pilot, and that there's several different ways that you could do it. For a pilot, we haven't really determined yet whether it would be better to contract it out or to purchase or lease that equipment. That's going to be kind of part of the analysis as we work through the process. But those services are available. But what I can say is that the intention is for the cabinet to have a hand in ensuring that any civil penalties that are issued are done in accordance with the legislation. So even if like the radar, the equipment part was done by a third party, KYTC would still be looking at how to confirm those.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. With that, I have a motion and a second on the bill. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Blanton.
Aye.
Representative Branscombe.
Yes.
Representative Bridges. Yes. Representative Elliott.
Aye.
Representative Fleming.
Aye.
Representative Hale.
Yes.
Representative Heverin. Yes. Representative Hodgson.
Nay.
Representative Huff.
Yes.
Representative Imes.
Yes.
Representative Lewis.
Yes.
Representative McCool.
Yes.
Representative Neighbors.
Yes.
Representative Palumbo.
Yes.
Representative Roberts.
Yes.
Representative Smith. Representative Swan.
No.
Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Yes.
Representative Thomas.
Aye.
Representative Upchurch.
Yes.
Representative Wesley.
Yes.
Representative Williams.
Yes.
Chairman Dixon.
Yes. House Bill 201 is reported with favorable expression with committee substitute attached thereto. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members
Appreciate
of the
it.
committee.
While Chairman Blanton is making it back to the chair, Representative Bray, if you would like to come to the testimony table and your guest with you, please.
Representative Bray, would you please introduce yourself and your guest you have at the table with you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Josh Bray, the 71st House District.
Ariel Wolf, General Counsel to the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association.
Welcome, and I understand there is a proposed committee substitute on this measure in the members' packet by Representative Upchurch. Do I hear a motion on this committee
Motion on the
sub?
committee sub.
Motion by Upchurch, second by Representative Heverin. Motion is adopted. Representative Bray? Pardon? All those in favor? All those opposed? Now, committee sub is adopted, getting a cart before the horse. Representative Bray, you and your guest may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So House Bill 135 is a bill that deals with autonomous vehicles. I first become interested in the technology back when my wife bought a Subaru Ascent, and that thing's got lane assist and adaptive cruise control. So when you hit the interstate, you can set your cruise control. It keeps up with the traffic in front or behind of you through radar. And then the lane assist uses cameras to keep it in the lane. So effectively, through a commercial or a vehicle for sale on the market now, I was exposed to some form of autonomous vehicle. So in tracking with that and making the hour-and-a-half drive back and forth to Frankfurt every day, I started looking into the actual technology and looking at where this was going in the future. And so what you have before you is a bill on just that. It would provide the regulatory framework for autonomous vehicles in Kentucky. Today I'm joined by Ariel Wolf from the autonomous vehicle industry. Earlier this month, the AVIA, or the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association, testified before the Ways and Means.
Motion on the bill as amended by the House Committee Substitute.
A motion been made. Representative Bray, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, sir.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
It was Representative Hodgson.
Yes, sir. In the event that one of these autonomous vehicles, which I understand are substantially better technology than even Tesla self-driving vehicles, if they were carrying a controlled substance, for instance, a narcotics delivery, interstate trafficking in people, who is liable for that crime if there's no driver to arrest?
Thank you, Representative, and excellent question on that. The way the bill would work and the way generally the frameworks would work is we would proceed exactly, the inquiry would be exactly as it would simply without a driver present. So the examination of the facts would yield the determination as to whether the owner of the autonomous vehicle was responsible for that, or if in some case those substances were put on without knowledge, then presumably that would proceed that way and simply just would not have a driver as part of the inquiry there. The bill assigns ownership, accountability in all of the for compliance with motor vehicle and traffic laws.
Okay, thank you.
Representative McCool.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that was one of my questions too. I appreciate that from Representative. Maybe because I'm just old, I'm a little hesitant about some of this. So, and that's okay to be old. But in conditions like weather, technology working, not working, sometimes I'm driving and I lose contact with the cell phone, things of that nature, or even potentially could these trucks be carrying chemicals that are very dangerous and nobody there to monitor that. I'm just concerned with the safety piece of that. I understand it probably saves money and in many aspects, certainly on the downside, it could cost jobs as well. But the major thing that I'm concerned with is safety. How are you going to monitor that? How are we going to ensure that? Because I will tell you, I did read one report that said these type of vehicles have a higher rate of accidents than those with somebody in them per million miles. However, the good side of that, they had fewer injuries. So there's a plus and negative on that. So could you address some of that, please?
Absolutely, Representative. Thank you so much for the question. To the first part, with respect to weather, the primary concept in fully autonomous vehicles, where there's no expectation for a human to perform any aspects of the driving task, so not driver assist, but really fully autonomous, the concept is known as an operational design domain. So the parameters through which the autonomous vehicle is engineered to operate. And that includes considerations regarding weather. So as it currently stands, autonomous vehicles, where we're seeing deployments in Texas and New Mexico, Arizona, California, Florida, et cetera, that ODD, that operational design domain, may exclude operating in certain kinds of weather. It simply won't operate until the engineering and the testing and the validation has proven that to be the case. Oh, and on the safety point, if I may, sir, the fundamental issue that autonomous vehicles are coming to address, and this has been the impetus for over a decade now, is the plain fact that's been reaffirmed over and over again that U.S. Department of Transportation has shown, and again reaffirmed very recently, that the overwhelming contributor to collisions, accidents, fatalities, and injuries in the roadways is human impairment in all forms, intoxication, distraction, fatigue, etc. Human impairment is responsible for that. And autonomous vehicles fundamentally will improve safety. The numbers continue to get worse and worse. The tragedy on our roadways, there were 43,000 fatalities in 2021, and it's looking like it's going to be worse when they have all the information in 2022. So in that sense, they're going to make the roads safer. And on top of that, the data itself, I think I may be familiar with the study that you mentioned, which is based on much older data, and there was some statistical issue with that. We've seen it come up a couple of times. The data that the federal government is collecting on AV performance that is required for every AV developer to submit is showing an incredible safety record, tens of millions of miles on the road, with very few, if any, collisions that result in even any severe injury of any kind. It's just minor collisions. And on top of that, the indications show that it's the result primarily, again, of human behavior.
Representative Bridges.
I'm sitting here looking through this, and I do have some concerns here. I've been on transportation committee since I come into office 5 years ago. I understand the necessity and the need that we need to get this going. So I am for this, but I do have some concerns. If I'm hit by an autonomous vehicle, who's liable? Who do I go to? Do I go to the manufacturer? Do I go to the owner? Or, how do I get my car fixed? What about my medical bills and things of that nature? Because I know that we're a no-fault state, which basically just requires everybody to have insurance. But, you've got a $60,000 car out there, you run into it and you've got to go against, I don't want to call in company names, but the manufacturer. I mean, I'm very well aware that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get into that suit for a $50,000-$60,000 car. How are we going to address the liability of that? And if I'm a person in the vehicle, but the vehicle's driving, why would it be my fault? Because it was the manufacturer that said it's good and it's good. I mean, I'm not trying to oppose, but I think these are valid questions.
Representative, thank you so much for the question. It's an important one. What the legislation and this particular bill, as well as legislation around the country, is looking to do is assign clear accountability without prejudging liability. And I think that's what we have to focus on. Again, the context is trying to make the roads safer across the board so these collisions go down. And in fact, widespread deployment of AVs is expected to ultimately reduce significantly the instances you're describing. The bill does talk about the owner being responsible exclusively for the compliance with traffic laws. There's a minimum insurance, which we've engaged with stakeholders to address of $1 million with financial responsibility that has to be satisfied for the Transportation Cabinet. So there's an entity, a person that's operating and owning the vehicles that has to work through those provisions. So all of that creates this accountability. But again, in those types of situations, we don't want to prejudge liability, and the bill does not disturb in any way the existing approach to liability in the Commonwealth. It doesn't touch any of that, certainly, and what we're not looking to do is put our thumb on the scale either way. We want to maintain the existing regime while providing for clear accountability.
And within the committee sub, one of the issues that was kind of brought to our attention from the trial attorneys was just to your question, who do you sue? So we did clarify that the owner of the vehicle is the operator, the owner of the and we increased the minimum insurance requirements, like Ariel said, to $1 million.
Okay, if you only indulge me, Mr. Speaker, and I do appreciate that, Josh, Representative Bray. We've talked about this, and we're going to continue this discussion, but I still think there's some ways that, depending on who the insurance company is and who they are, where they're going to address that blame, and it could get into very high litigation costs. So I think we may need to dive a little deeper into that, maybe not being specific to that point, but at least open up, make it clear the direction you go and how you get there. Just for that, to be honest with you, my son-in-law's personal injury attorney, he looked it over and he said, "You got a mess on your hands because I don't know how you do it." And he didn't talk bad about it. He said, "I can't tell you to vote for it or against it." So people know my history here, so I just want to clarify that. I just want it to be fair to all. We need this bill, but we also got to be fair to our constituents that they are covered and that they will be taken care of too, and they're not left at a high cost disadvantage. So just to clarify my reasonings for that and let you know. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate the chair, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I have a question. What type of vehicles does this legislation, is it going to particularly apply to?
Thank you so much for the question, Representative. The legislation approaches the issue of autonomous vehicle technology holistically. So we're seeing across the country and frankly across the world deployments of AV technology in anywhere from light-duty vehicles, medium-duty, heavy-duty, as well as last-mile, low-speed electric delivery vehicles with nobody inside at all, just groceries and things like that. So the technology, the bill is able to accommodate all use cases while maintaining and ensuring a safety regime that is fundamental to the entire construct. And that's really three pillars, if I may just take just a moment on that. AV technology under this bill cannot be deployed in any way unless it meets three central pillars, among other requirements. First and foremost, an autonomous vehicle must be able to comply with all state and local traffic laws and rules of the road. If it can't do that, it can't be on the road. Second, it must be in full compliance with or exceed federal motor vehicle safety standards and self-certify to that effect. And third, the autonomous vehicle must be able to achieve what's called a minimal risk condition. And that's where if it encounters any situation where there's either the system detects a problem that it can't address, or if there's a mechanical issue like any vehicle might have, it must be able to achieve a condition that we all would need to do, put on the hazards, pull over, or if that's not appropriate at that time, again, whatever the context is, that minimal risk condition is a defined term under the Society of Automotive Engineers. So autonomous vehicle must be able to meet those three things under this bill at a minimum. And that would be the case, back to the question, for, again, a passenger vehicle in a ride-hail context, or a long-haul truck, or anything in between, or a low-speed electric delivery vehicle.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. That was definitely something that was very helpful. So you did say that it would apply to commercial vehicles, moving freight, things of that nature. Would this apply to vehicles such as coal trucks?
Representative, as written, it would apply to those to all use cases. As we look at it, the current deployments are focused on ride-hail and on trucking in Texas and in those contexts. I think it's intended to accommodate all use cases over time.
Okay, and I know that you were talking about some of the safety measures. I know that often at home we'll have what they call weigh stations, so that we have trucks, and I'm sure it's not just for coal trucks. It's just, I'm Eastern Kentucky, and of course we haul coal. So would these vehicles be capable of pulling over at weigh stations and being weighed to make sure that they have the proper weight on the highways? Because I too am an attorney, and a lot of times what we see is that the overloaded freight vehicles are the ones that cause the most damage. Even if the accidents and the injuries are fewer because of the automation, if these are vehicles that are going to be hauling a lot of weight, those are the ones that obviously most of the time, when unfortunately something does go wrong, that's when the most damage occurs.
Well, thank you so much for the question, the opportunity to answer that, because it is so fundamental to the industry's focus on safety. There have been discussions for 2 years, and actually culminated just recently, and happy to follow up with further information, discussions between the autonomous vehicle industry, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to address precisely that. Enhanced pre-trip inspections, where there at some point in time there may not be a driver, so it's going to be an enhanced pre-trip inspection. How do we address weigh stations? That's being addressed through certain technologies that will transmit information, and all the requirements. The key thing is all of those requirements remain in place, but they may adapt to the satisfaction, and only to the satisfaction, of the appropriate regulators and implementers of those protocols. And that's being worked out, and maybe in the coming days, I believe there'll be an issue even addressing warning triangles, the deployment of those. So all of that's has been worked out and is about to be worked out. And so we're confident that will continue the elevated safety issues that you're noting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for this conversation. I have two questions, if I may. The first is on the second page here under Section 1, subsection 5, human driver means a natural person in the vehicle with a valid license to operate a motor vehicle. Does that mean that if this was, say, a long-haul truck, that the human being would not need a CDL?
Representative, thank you for the question. I don't believe that's what that means. All requirements remain in place. If there's a human driver of an autonomous truck that does not have the automated driving system engaged, that person would need to have a CDL.
Thank you. And then my other question is, could you talk a little bit how this bill addresses the autonomous vehicles when they might need to interact with law enforcement?
Absolutely, Representative. Thank you. I mentioned the 3 pillars earlier, but a fourth one, honorary pillar, so to speak, is one that's been adopted in many states, and we have included that here, of course. It's called, it's a requirement to submit what is called a law enforcement interaction plan. So in order to deploy on the roads of this state, it is required prior to doing so to submit this plan to law enforcement that provides information about how to pull over, what happens if the vehicle's on the side of the road, how to interact with the remote assistance or remote monitor, all the information that will be located on the vehicle, where will it be located, those kinds of things. And that gets submitted in advance before any autonomous vehicle technology is deployed on the roads. And that, along with some of the provisions later on in the bill that assign the owner responsibility for crash reporting and all of the applicable things that happen in those instances that are fundamental to law enforcement, those are also addressed here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all today for the testimony. I actually had about 4 questions, but Representative Bridges asked one and Representative Tackett Lafferty asked one, but I have 2 more, just very short. First off, where does the insurance companies or Insurance Institute stand on this? What is their position, I guess? Or is there a position?
Well, Representative, thanks for the question. I can't speak for the insurance companies or the industry, and I'll let them weigh in. What I will say is that on the insurance side, again, as Representative Bray noted, it's been increased to $1 million of insurance coverage and proof of financial responsibility. And in the more than 20 states that have adopted this construct and the others that have adopted similar constructs, been able to address the incorporation of AV technology in the insurance framework.
And I really have no doubt that these are very safe. I really do. I believe they're very safe vehicles, probably much safer than a lot of our vehicles that are being driven by people today. But just one other question, and in referring to if there's an accident that happens, and we all know that will at some point happen. We know that's inevitable to happen. But in the language here, it says if the accident involves a fully autonomous vehicle as defined in Section 1, this is actually on page 9 of this act, the responsibility, and I know you addressed this, but it said the responsibility to file the report under this section shall rest with the owner of the fully autonomous vehicle or a person on behalf of the vehicle owner. So if there is an accident occurs and it's the fault of this autonomous vehicle, how is there going to be proof? I mean, how is the person going to be able to legitimately prove that was the fault of that vehicle?
Representative, thank you for the question. Again, going back to what I noted earlier, the bill doesn't touch any of the existing liability structures or that are in place in the Commonwealth, and so it would proceed exactly as it would under the current approach. Whatever the facts are, whatever the police report says, whatever that is, what we don't want to do is, with a technology like this that has so much potential, not just on safety and economic benefit, is prejudge liability, create a presumption, either explicitly or implicitly, that it's the fault of the technology, when in fact the trend lines and the statistics and the information, the data that we're seeing now is the opposite. We know that human impairment is the issue, and we know that at this time, where there are incidents, they're usually the result of human error, not coming to a complete stop at the stop sign, things like that. So the accountability is there. It's the registered owner. It must be titled. It has to be plated, and all of those things that are in the bill that I noted earlier. But again, the facts need to be assessed under the current system that we have, and at that point, whatever they are, it'll proceed with insurance or otherwise.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just make one more question, please. I'll be very quick. On page 29, line 15, it talks about a lead vehicle. Line 14 and 15. Does that mean that if there are 2 of these vehicles, does one of those have to be occupied by a driver if they are in like a group?
So that section of the bill deals with what's called platooning, and that is already existing law within the state. And so, for instance, if I believe the way it works now is we've got a manned driver, semi-driver, and then behind him is a semi that's operating with a person inside. They don't have to be aware. They don't have to be driving. They're just someone inside, and then they have the ability to have another one following. So they are platooning within a line. And so all that does is adds clarification to that section so that we're not amending the current platooning statute. So that we're not causing an issue. That's just cleanup language for that in the context of the AV. So those are already going on the roads right now. I mean, I passed one maybe a year back, and it kind of blew my mind because here's this big semi and nobody's inside it. But, they've been operating within the state for, a few years, I believe, and to my knowledge, there's not been any issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Josh, for not only bringing this bill. I think it's some technology that puts Kentucky in the forefront of this technology. So many times Kentucky likes to lag behind the rest of the nation, and I think this is a technology that will put us squarely in the, not necessarily in the driver's seat, but definitely in the lead. I know we've kind of worried about some rabbit holes. We've gone down a few today, and that's not something that I want to do. But one thing that I want to discuss, if with the passage of this bill, we're not going to see autonomous driverless vehicles on the road starting next week. What is the process that would have to take place in Kentucky before we would see basically full operation of autonomous vehicles in Kentucky?
Representative, thank you for that question. And it's exactly right. I would defer to individual companies to their specific plans, but generally speaking, a deployment of fully autonomous vehicles starts with the mapping of a particular area, and that's done with conventional vehicles and drivers that they map the area very closely, and then there's testing, and there's a lot that goes into it. Again, to develop, as I was discussing earlier, that operational design domain. And once that process occurs, the technology is then deployed and built out with a focus on safety at all times. I think the key idea is that it's important to preserve the flexibility of some entities that have been doing that for a decade or more, and others that, and everything in between. So in that respect, the process, it's not going to be, there's enactment and there's autonomous vehicles everywhere. It's a very deliberate process, and happy to follow up with specific examples of deployment, including from some of the companies themselves.
Yeah, make no mistake, if this passes, I mean, we're not looking, like you said, next week, and this won't be the only time this statute will be looked at. It will continuously be updated, upgraded. It gives the Highway Department the flexibility to implement the regulatory framework. Now, I wish I could say that this passes and we never have to adjust it, but that's just not that's not true. We do that every day here, unfortunately.
Mr. Chairman. Just one final statement, I guess, is, if we get out in front of this now, we're not going to see coal trucks being autonomous. We're not going to see tractor trailers going up and down the road. We kind of get out in front of this and get the technology built out in Kentucky, and we're looking at 5 or 6 years possibly before we see, somebody move in here that says, hey, Kentucky is ready. And I think that gives us time to fully fledge out some of the other litigious things that we may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief with my comment. I just want to thank you, Representative Bray, for bringing this issue. So many times in Kentucky, we are behind on making any changes to things, and I applaud your effort for helping us be very proactive rather than reactive on this. This is coming to Kentucky, whether we like it or not. I might be a little too young, Representative McCool. I'm just teasing. But I think it is something, it's a generational issue. And so we recognize this is coming and we can't stop it. So we might as well get ahead of the curve on it. So I just want to thank you for your efforts to both of you all on this.
Thank you. And I do have a couple quick questions. I will be brief with my questions, Mr. Wolf, and I'm looking for very short, concise answers, okay? Because we do have 3 other groups that signed up to speak, and we want to give them the ability to speak as well. So we're running on time here of getting close. This one bill's already took more than our whole committee generally does. With that, first off, if these were to be utilized in a school bus, if a school system chose to use it, how would that operate in our rural roadways?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not aware of any instance of this technology being incorporated in school buses at all, anywhere, and no plans to do so.
Very good. You mentioned weather, and they would not be deployed during bad weather. How would they address driving? Because some of these are long-distance drivers. They drive into bad weather unexpectedly, and it's my understanding that Tennessee is incurring some issues with these vehicles during inclement weather because they're not able to determine which lane to drive in and where to drive. So what happens when that occurs?
Mr. Chairman, the concept of the operational design domain focuses on a number of things, including weather. So the current testing is being done to ensure that the vehicles can accommodate weather, but until that is the autonomous vehicle companies and developers can attest and ensure that the weather can be accommodated through the current sensors, and then they won't deploy them in those contexts. And so the plan, of course, is to be able to accommodate weather. Right now, that's why we see deployments in certain cases where there's nicer weather. But over time, and that's happening very quickly, they will be able to accommodate all sorts of weather conditions.
But if they're having trouble, then apparently they are being deployed and they are incurring bad weather currently in Tennessee, right?
So they're designed, if there's a weather condition, again, to achieve that minimal risk condition. And so in the ride-hail context, and there's a dispatch to retrieve the vehicle, or in the trucking context, something similar. So again, if it detects that it's not able to read the lanes in a certain way, or whatever it is, that it cannot perform that driving task, it achieves the minimal risk condition, and that's the safest thing that any of us would do if it's, we can't see the road.
Very good. And a couple quick concerns from law enforcement. One of the things that we see happen, especially in commercial vehicles with long-haul trucking, is oftentimes they will utilize that to transport large amounts of illicit drugs. And generally you have a driver to debrief or interrogate. How do we address that issue and those concerns for them?
Well, Mr. Chairman, it may in a sense be simpler. The owner of the autonomous truck is going to be accountable to law enforcement in all instances. And so the absence of a driver, in a sense, just cuts straight to the owner. These are going to be dispatched from a depot, and that's, again, the facts are either going to be that there's responsibility or accountability resting there, or in some way it was without any knowledge, and that will be the inquiry that proceeds without, at some point, if there's no driver at all, though right now there are safety monitors, if there's no one at all, that simply wouldn't be part of the inquiry.
I understand, but if we take a driver off in Kentucky, obviously we could interview them, and the fear of maybe being incarcerated in Kentucky may influence them a little bit to be cooperative, whereas if the owner of the vehicle is in California, it's hard to do an interrogation in California and get truth. The other issue that they have is oftentimes, and this would apply to work zones as well from flagmen, but first responders will be at the scene of an accident and they'll be using their hands to stop, move traffic along, put them in other lanes. Now, I know that the technology on these vehicles doesn't follow these hand signals, because I have witnessed this firsthand in one of the cars I rode in California. We came up on a four-way intersection and the vehicle across from us was motioning for us to come on through. The car just sit there, didn't know what to do. the driver got frustrated till he realized there was no driver in the car, right? So how do they handle that? How do they handle coming up on an accident and you've got somebody out there with their hands or maybe just a flashlight? I'm sure that the technology is not there to be able to address that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. This is at the core of what the AV deployment and testing is being looked at and currently underway in all of these instances. They're called edge cases. And so it focuses on those particular scenarios, the simulation, the closed course testing, and all of that technology, be able to handle that in the public roads. Fundamentally, back to the concept of a minimal risk condition, if there's something that's so out of touch or out of sync that it has to simply achieve that low risk condition, then that's one thing. But I've seen, I can't speak to the instance that you noted, that being able to navigate those scenarios without lane markings, without things, and my experience having been in one was a little bit different, where it was able to go around a double parked vehicle, because again, the sensors are able to see in such high resolution picture, 360 degrees in a radius that humans can't do. It's able to navigate those situations much better than potentially a human driver could, because we can't see on the other side of the truck, whereas radar and LiDAR and all that. So it kind of depends on the situation, but certainly there may be cases where it has to achieve and just pull over if there's something. By and large, though, we'll be able to accommodate those situations.
Thank you all. Representative Bray, you have any other comments before we call our other groups, or you want to wait till after they finish?
We can wait.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have to speak Mr. Bill Miller and Steve Rolfe. Please come to the table. And I will remind our guests that we are starting to get along in some time here. And to the members, let's try to keep our questions short, concise, so that we can give this the just due that it needs. Welcome, Mr. Miller. If you'll introduce yourself and your guests for the committee, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Bill Miller. I'm the political director for Teamsters Local 89 in Louisville, Kentucky. This is Steve Ruoff.
Yeah, with Car Hall with RCS Transportation, based out of Simpsonville, Kentucky, haul out of Kentucky truck plant.
Thank you, John. Please begin.
Thank you for allowing me to appear before you this afternoon. As I said, my name is Bill Miller, and I'm the political director for Teamsters Local 89 in Louisville, Kentucky. The Teamsters represent over 25,000 working people in Kentucky. There are Teamster members in every legislative district in Kentucky, and Kentucky Teamsters work in many different industries that drive the Commonwealth's economy. The Teamsters are asking you to vote no on House Bill 135. The autonomous vehicle industry is pushing and will continue to push for the broadest and least regulated framework in which to operate. There are many issue areas that this committee, the Kentucky General Assembly, and the general public need to take into consideration when discussing anything related to highly automated vehicles. Here are just a few of these issues, and I'll pare it down for the sake of time even. Companies, number one is 100% transparency and safety crash data in both simulations and live testing. Companies that wish to operate in the state should provide all safety and crash data, which must also be publicly available. If a company's technology is truly ready to be put on the road alongside unsuspecting Kentucky families, companies should be willing to provide that information. Last year, HAV company Waymo sued the state of California in order to keep driverless crash data secret. This is attempting to block a public records request. We cannot accept the excuse that crash data is a trade secret. We would request a public-facing website for all incidents and accidents, similar to what we just discussed above. Another on there. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. There must be a human operator in all autonomous vehicles to act as both a human fail-safe as well as to manually operate the more complex driving tasks necessary. Ports, warehouses, fuel centers, loading and unloading, and even at weigh stations. There's been some recent polling done in other states about autonomous vehicles, most recently in Indiana and Tennessee. And the larger the vehicle gets, the more opposed drivers are to it. Voters are uncomfortable sharing the roads with autonomous vehicles. 65% in Indiana oppose it, 70% in Tennessee. Voters are overwhelmingly not supportive of sharing the road with driverless tractor trailers. 83% in Indiana and 81% in Tennessee. Voters are more comfortable with a human operator driver present. 58% in Indiana and 57% in Tennessee. A January 2023 letter from the City of San Francisco to the state's Consumer Protection Division outlined multiple issues with the fully driverless vehicles operating in San Francisco. To quote this letter, on April 5th, 2022, a Cruise AV stopped in a travel lane, creating an obstruction for a San Francisco fire department on its way to a 3-alarm fire. The fire department has an additional operational concern about Cruise AV driving around fire apparatus. On June 12, 2022, a Cruise AV ran over a fire hose that was in use in an active fire scene. Driving over a fire hose that is in use can seriously injure our firefighters. The letter goes on with more examples. On January 21st, 2023, a similar incident occurred. The Cruise AV entered the area of an active firefighting and approached fire hoses on the ground. Firefighters on the scene made every effort to prevent the Cruise AV from driving over their hoses and were not able to do so until they shattered a front window on the Cruise AV. California's obsession with this industry has shown us what happens, and their citizens are paying the price. This isn't California. Let's keep Kentucky, Kentucky. The minimal risk condition for AVs is to vote no. With that, I'll let Steve take over as a long and tenured driver.
Appreciate the opportunity. I've been around trucks 37 years. I'm getting ready to turn 40, been third generation in this business. And when he brought up, Mr. Wolf brought up the enhanced pre-trip. Has anybody looked into what an enhanced pre-trip is? And what that means is that they're going to supposedly do a more thorough inspection before a trip starts, but then they are exempt from having to go through a weigh station. They're exempt from regular, just a state trooper pulling me over. I don't have to have any cause to be pulled over. Anybody in a regular car, you have to be speeding, anything else, I can just be checked. Everybody's aware of what's going on in Ohio right now with the catastrophe with that up there with that train derailment. I have the ability, if I'm in control of that vehicle, if anything malfunctions, anything happens, that's when your breakdown happens. You know, anytime you have any issues with your cars, it's when you're driving yourself. That's when you can diagnose stuff by feel, by this common sense. And that's where we lose that common sense factor. You know, you got the ability to handle it in situations that a computer's not going to be able to. Yesterday with the weather, and I'm going to make it short, but with the weather, how bad do people, when you're sitting there watching a basketball game and it starts pouring down rain and you lose signal, aggravating as hell. It does the same thing with GPS tracking, anything else like that. It interferes with satellite communication. I've had numerous times it put me on roads where there's power lines down, trees down, you know, with low-hanging branches. It just puts you in bad situations. I just ask everybody to consider that on your way home today. Just think about how it would be to feel sitting there, a truck going down the road next to you, any kind of cars. There's no actual real human control of this situation. And then think about what good is it going to be able to sue somebody whenever you don't have that loved one there anymore anyway because of that situation. Yeah, we can make mistakes. Humans made mistakes through their whole lives. It's just the way it is. But why take it out of your hands? Thank you.
Not seeing any questions from any of the members. Thank you, Mr. Miller and Mr. Ruoff, for being with us today in your presentation. Next up, we have Miss Lillian Brents. Please come forward. If you would introduce yourself for the committee, and then you may begin.
Hello, my name is Lillian Brents. I represent Amalgamated Transit Union. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I represent Amalgamated Transit Union, who includes 1,000 transit workers throughout the Kentucky, including Covington, Lexington, and Louisville, where I am the union president of 1447. House Bill 135, which established a regulatory framework for operation of fully autonomous vehicles on public highways in Kentucky, is a dangerous bill, which should be shelved in the name of public safety. I'm also a mother of 5 kids. Imagine your kids being on a bus of an autonomous vehicle. Imagine the weather suddenly here in Kentucky goes bad. Imagine that vehicle stopping with no directions or no nothing. Your kids are out there on the road. Imagine your kids being on that autonomous vehicle. We also represent the public transit throughout the city and state, and we move the city. Imagine we hold about 65 passengers per bus. Imagine your loved one coming from a concert or something in the middle of that crosswalk, and your loved one walking in that crosswalk, my loved one on that bus, that autonomous vehicle unable to see your loved one in that crosswalk, and your loved one is lost. Whether it is today or whether it is 5 years from now, $1 million is not going to compensate me and you and the loss of a loved one. Autonomous vehicles have proven to be unsafe in various situations, especially weather conditions, especially when there is not a human present. We are responsible for so much more than just driving a bus. When operating a bus, we have been responsible for finding your lost loved one, whether they was either in a situation to where they've been in traffic, or a lost loved one to where they may have wandered off in the road. That is what a human does in one of those commercial vehicles while operating a bus, not only just driving. Also, when it comes to the autonomous vehicle and the technology that goes alongside with that, we are talking about the many jobs here in Kentucky that you will be putting in jeopardy. Autonomous vehicle, upon the unproven technology, has been found to fail under all types of weather. Moreover, unsafe AV technology, automatic passengers, is a danger factor, has skyrocketed since they have been testing those. All public transit buses rolling in Kentucky streets should continue to have a transit worker on board. When they say this bill does not affect the school buses, it will affect not only the school buses, but it will also affect those city buses that, so many depend on from getting from point A to point B. A few years ago, an ATU member stopped a woman from leaping to the roadways to her death. A person on side that bus was able to pull over and get her to safety. Oftentimes, we assist the men and women that we put in office to serve and protect. We assist the police department. Sometimes we are often the first one on site to where we can radio in and let them know a danger is upon. By having an autonomous vehicle on the road, whether it's commercial or non-commercial, you are taking away that added safety feature that is implied when somebody is in that driver's seat. It is all in a day's work to have brave men and women of our union, bus operators, the eyes and ears of our community, routinely perform heroic acts that impact all of us. Whether you ride a transit or not, if our operator is taken off the bus, our community watchdogs will be gone, leading to senseless and preventable tragedies. While I understand the temptation to move forward with new technology, the plain truth is that there is no substitute for our members and your loved ones who do so much more than simply just drive buses. They have to acknowledge the traffic laws, maintain the order of the vehicle, enforce the rules, and assist passengers with disability, provide customers with vital information, oversee fare collections, and so much more. Imagine traveling, your loved one traveling to this state, and they may need to ask direction. Oftentimes, they refer to a transit worker to do so. Our autonomous vehicle would not be able to assist your loved one. Instead of pushing transit workers to the unemployment line, Kentucky should instead focus on the workforce development, increase the funding for transit operations and maintenance employees, get those vehicles on the road safely before we start experimenting with unproven, unmanned technology which can turn riders into crash dummies. Thank you for your consideration of our views.
Questions? Thank you, Ms. Brents. Okay. Next up, we have Paul Kelly. Mr. Kelly, if you'll make your way to the chair. Sir, if you'll introduce yourself for the committee, and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Kelly. I'm the president of the Kentucky Justice Association. I'm also an attorney with the law firm Satterley and Kelly in Louisville. I want to thank Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I will be as brief as I possibly can. First and foremost, the Kentucky Justice Association and the trial attorneys generally agree that legislation is needed for autonomous vehicles. We understand the wave of the future. We understand that they're already on the roadways in some places, and that there's it's an unstoppable force, and it's going to happen. I believe a comment was made earlier that Kentucky needs to be at the forefront of legislation for these type of vehicles, and we agree with that. We think that Kentucky should be on the forefront for legislation of this kind, and it should be on the forefront of accountability and responsibility for things that can occur. And we've looked at the language, and I do appreciate Representative Bray, Mr. Wolf, and their team. They have worked with us to try to get some language that our organization can agree to, and that would really help Kentucky citizens. But we still have a few concerns about some of the details of the legislation that's pending now that really needs to be improved in order to make it tenable and to protect the citizens of Kentucky. Specifically, in Representative Bridges had really honed in on the issue earlier. And we're concerned that the practical application of House Bill 35, the committee substitute as it exists right now, the practical application of that bill is going to result in eliminating negligence claims for product or for property damage, and other types of injuries. So the example that I think Representative Bridges used really, does hone in on the issue. And so imagine today, under today's, framework, you have two drivers. One driver runs a red light, hits the other driver, totals their $60,000 or $80,000 vehicle. And we have all kinds of avenues that we can use to address those situations now, to address that property damage, the $80,000 property damage. We can file a negligence claim. You ran a red light. You should be held accountable for that. If there was something wrong with the vehicle, we can file a products liability claim. But we still have both of those, and it's not neither or. Now, I have been representing folks in personal injury and specifically products liability claims for 21 years. Products liability claim, unfortunately, the issue with that is you have to prove that there was a problem with that product. You have to prove that there was a design defect. You have to prove that there was a manufacturing defect associated with the product that caused whatever event occurred. And in this situation, it will cost several hundreds of thousands of dollars each and every time an autonomous vehicle strikes another vehicle, causing damage to that property. It is absolutely cost prohibitive to spend that kind of money, which would be required to prove damage for a $60,000 or $80,000 vehicle. And the impact of that would be that folks wouldn't be able to do it. If that's the only avenue that you have to pursue such a claim, you're out the property damage. And who else could be out the property damage? Well, possibly the insurance company that insures that vehicle. At least in that instance, the person would be able to get compensated for it. But a lot of people don't carry that type of insurance, so they get nothing. The banks could be stuck holding a note for a piece of property that damaged and beyond repair, and they have no recourse. So we are significantly concerned about that aspect. A negligence action, on the other hand, is generally cheap, generally inexpensive. Property damage cases are resolved in car collision cases every day in Kentucky, and they generally don't require great deals of litigation. They generally don't require people to expend significant amounts of money, and people have recourse if something occurs to their property or other injuries are incurred. So we've looked at Section 9 of subsection 6, and it's true, and we do agree that there is improvement to the language, that the operator of the vehicle is now deemed the owner, but it's unclear by the bill as it exists in its current state as to whether that's going to have any impact whatsoever on a person who suffered a loss like their expensive truck, whether it's going to have any impact at all on their ability to be able to pursue a negligence claim. Because I think, again, Representative Bridges identified the problem. As the bill exists right now, I think the owner is going to say, what did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. I just owned the vehicle. There was something else wrong. So our biggest concern is that without express language in the bill establishing that the owner or someone else can be held liable for negligence, the same standard as what a human driver would be held accountable for, then the practical application is people won't be able to file such a claim. The people will now, the innocent party will now have to suffer that loss, and no one will be held accountable. And it's simply cost prohibitive to spend several hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to recover 50 or 60,000 or possibly even less in property damage. So we certainly agree that there should be some legislation on this growing technology and this issue that's going to certainly be the wave of the future in Kentucky and everywhere. But we don't think that people should be treated differently because they were hit by an autonomous vehicle as opposed to a human driver. Because we know what happens when they're hit by a car operated by a human. They can file that negligence claim and they can recover their property damage for a relatively inexpensive amount. Just a couple other small concerns that we have with the bill as it exists now. I believe that everybody agrees that we are decades away from, individuals owning autonomous vehicles, individuals riding in autonomous vehicles for personal use. And because we're decades away from that, we think that House Bill 35 probably ought to address the immediate issue, which is commercial vehicles that look to be on the roadways much, much sooner. The insurance issues that have been addressed so far, we think they're certainly better, but we think it's unclear at this point if this bill, which I believe Mr. Wolf addressed earlier, will apply to all types of vehicles. We're a little concerned that the language concerning insurance coverage doesn't fully address who has to own this insurance. Is it the owner? Is it someone else? We're concerned that it doesn't address whether the insurance only covers commercial vehicles or whether it covers personal vehicles. So those are types of things that we think need to certainly be addressed. And also out-of-state vehicles. The legislation really seems to impact right now, in-state owners and operators of automatic or automated vehicles. Well, what happens if an automated vehicle that's owned by an entity out of state comes into Kentucky? It's not addressed, and it's unclear at this point as to whether these insurance coverages and whether any of the rules that are set forth in the proposed bill or the current substitute would be applicable. So, again, we really do support the enactment of legislation. We simply want to make sure that Kentuckians are protected. We want to make sure that Kentuckians have recourse for their property damage losses, and we think that there's a path to accomplishing that very goal while getting this important technology on the road and making it normal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. We do have a question, Representative Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. Have you been able to look at other states that have AV framework and liability that they have put into place, and has that been successful? Is that better than what this legislation calls for in your mind? And if it is, what recommendations would you have to? I think you've given us your recommendation, but I was just wondering if you had looked at other states and how it had worked in those states.
Thank you, Representative Elliott. Thank you for your question. We have looked at other states, and quite frankly, we don't think that other states have really adequately addressed this issue. Other states will have different definitions of the automated driving system and who the operator is. It can be the owner, it can be the system itself, it can be the manufacturer. but none of these other states that we've seen, and I won't represent that I've seen every bill across the nation, but nothing that I've seen specifically hones in on the issue that we've raised today, that Representative Bridges brought up concerning what happens and how cheaply or how expensive would it be to get some recourse for any property damage that occurs. So our recommendation would be to expressly say it, put it into the bill, and it wouldn't be an issue where we're predetermining liability, because I think that was a concern that was raised earlier, that we don't want to put something in the bill that's going to say that anybody is responsible for a particular accident or incident that occurred. But we do think that the bill can say that the owner of the automated car can be liable for negligence, or a claim can be pursued for negligence against that owner, just the way a claim for negligence could be filed if that person was actually driving the vehicle. That's really our concern.
Negligence per se, but negligence kind of outlined in the bill. I understand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
Representative Bray, I did say that give you some time. It's 1:11 to 1:15 because we do have two more bills to take up. We do go on session at 2 o'clock. So at 1:15, we will be taking a vote.
All right, just a couple things real quick. As to the liability issue, we've worked with the trial attorneys, and we've incorporated some things that makes that a lot clearer. But as the gentleman stated, this isn't an issue in other states, and I don't exactly know why it would be an issue here. And listen, if we want to get into the safety issue, and I would like for Mr. Wolf to talk about that just briefly. I mean, these things are so much safer than even I am driving down the road. And if we're looking at, running over a fire hose, my mayor ran over a fire hose, and it was a big deal in the local paper. And that's with the mayor behind the wheel of a car. So, there's no doubt in my mind that a lot of these same issues were brought up when we were looking at, transitioning from the horse and buggy to the Model T. And so, but with that, I would like Mr. Wolf just to touch on some of the safety issues and help ease the committee's concerns on that.
Thank you, Representative. I'll be very, very brief here. What I'll say is I'd like to emphasize there is an urgency here. We have a catastrophe on our roadways nationwide, and in Kentucky, 734 traffic deaths reported in 2022. Doesn't include the thousands, tens of thousands of injuries, many of which are life-altering, as well as the economic damage. There's an urgency here, and again, reaffirmed and affirmed over and over again, human impairment is the primary factor there. So autonomous vehicles are going to make the roads safer, and that is the primary impetus for this technology, for this industry, an industry that it's facing global competition primarily and predominantly from China. We have an obligation to make sure that there's a regulatory framework in this country that can accommodate in the safest and swiftest way the deployment of this technology. So, and just one more note, just on the safety of it, I believe it's 14 or 15% of fatal crashes involve long-haul trucking. This is across the board. This is about making our roads safer in all contexts, in all uses, in all vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Representative Bray, you got one quick question. You got like 20 seconds. 15 after, we're going to vote.
I'm sorry, just quickly. There was a concern raised just recently that I hadn't even thought of. Obviously, when you only have liability insurance, if you're struck by this property damage is actually very concerning. So when he said there's no recourse, obviously if you only have liability, you're driving a work truck to work, you get hit, you don't have insurance coverage to cover it, your insurance will not cover your car. But if you cannot, say there's a situation where you've bought an $80,000 vehicle, you drive it off the lot, it's totaled, your your insurance pays the fair market value of that car, and it pays it to the debt that you've bought the vehicle. But when you drive it off the lot, there's a difference. Is there a recourse for the against the owner of that vehicle for the difference of that contract
30
balance?
seconds.
Thank you, Representative. Nothing in this bill changes in any way the recourse structure in the Commonwealth at all. There's no language of any kind. It is exactly as it would proceed under current law, and common law and precedent would address these situations, and there are novel situations every day. That's how it would proceed, and the courts would find a framework under current law without prejudging liability in any of those cases, including language that create the implied liability.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. I have a motion and a second on the bill as amended by the subcommittee substitute. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Branscombe?
Yes.
Representative Bridges?
Explain my vote. I want to vote yes. I support this bill. I do have some concerns, but I think it's something we need to move on. We are the major corridor, north and south, to Michigan to New York, and it's very important. So what's been said today is not my unsupport of the bill, and Representative Bray is very aware of that. But I do think we need to take a little longer look, because what's saying there's existing laws that address this. There's existing laws that address the existing circumstances of which vehicles are operated. There's not existing laws that address vehicles that are not operated, because that's not an existing. So that's where I'm coming from. I just want to make sure you're clear on that, and I look forward to working with you. But I am in support of this bill, and I do vote yes.
Representative Dixon?
Yes.
Representative Elliott?
Mr. Chairman, briefly explain my vote. I
Very
vote
briefly.
aye. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I vote aye for the same reasons that Representative Bridges has indicated. I think this is exciting technology, and so I thank you for bringing it. But obviously, we need to get it right, and I know you're open to that. So thank you.
Representative Fleming?
Aye.
Representative Hale?
No.
Representative Heverin?
Yes.
Representative Hodgson?
Yes.
Representative Huff?
Yes.
Representative Imes?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
No.
Representative Neighbors?
Yes.
Representative Palumbo?
May I briefly explain my vote?
Very briefly, please.
I worry about the human factor as well. The drunk driver, the drugged driver. But I have concerns about this bill. I'm a yes today, but I may not be on the floor. Thank you.
Representative Roberts?
Pass.
Representative Smith? Representative Swan?
Pass.
Representative Tackett Lafferty?
No.
Representative Thomas?
Yes.
Representative Upchurch?
Yes.
Representative Wesley?
No.
Representative Williams?
Yes.
Chairman Blanton?
Pass. House Bill 135 is reported with favorable expression with the committee substitute attached thereto. Same should do so on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you all. Next up is House Bill 392 by Vice Chair Dixon. It's an act relating to motor vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan Dixon, District 11.
Please proceed.
Thank you, sir. Now, House Bill 392 is essentially a statutory cleanup bill that removes references to the circuit clerk. This is part of cleaning up some of the language that's left over from when we switched the licensing.
Motion on the bill.
Motion been made. Who made the motion? Odell, Representative Smith, and second. Any questions?
I appreciate the committee's excitement.
Yes. Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Representative Branscombe? Yes. Representative Bridges? Yes. Representative Dixon? Yes. Representative Elliott?
Aye.
Representative Fleming?
Aye.
Representative Hale?
Yes.
Representative Heverin?
Yes.
Representative Hodgson?
Yes.
Representative Huff?
Yes.
Representative Imes?
Yes.
Representative Lewis.
Yes.
Representative McCool. Representative Neighbors.
Yes.
Representative Palumbo.
Yes.
Representative Roberts.
Yes.
Representative Smith. Representative Swan.
Yes.
Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Yes.
Representative Thomas.
Aye.
Representative Upchurch.
Yes.
Representative Wesley.
Yes.
Representative Williams.
I said yes.
Representative Williams.
Yes.
Chairman Blanton.
Yes. Having seen, receive favorable expression, the same should pass on the floor. Thank you, Vice Chair
Yep.
Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members.
We will conclude today with House Joint Resolution 7. It's a joint resolution designated the Representative John Bam Carney Memorial Highway in Taylor County, and it is sponsored by Representative Pollock.
Motion on the bill.
Second.
I need a motion on the sub first.
Walker.
Representative Walker, do I hear a second? Motion and a second by Representative Williams. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed. Now we can, any questions?
Do I need to make a motion on the bill as amended by the House Committee?
Yes, you do. Motion made here, second there. Got it. Before we get to the vote on this, Representative Pollock, because this is a very special resolution dealing with one of our own members, former members here, would you like to speak about it, about your resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. I just wanted to take just a second to share with you how honored and special this is for me to sponsor this joint resolution and carry it in the memory of my dear, dear friend, John Bam Carney. Just a huge, huge heart that served not only in the classroom to his students on the basketball court as a coach, but when he got here in 2009, serving the District 51 as a House representative, as a floor leader and the chair of the committees. As you well know, if you ever come across his path, how he loved to serve the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. And so I'll have more to say on the floor, Mr. Chairman, but for now, thank you for the opportunity to share with you just a few comments on our dear, dear friend, John Bam Carney.
Thank you, Representative Pollock, and we certainly do miss him, those of us that knew him. With that, having a motion and a second on the bill as amended by the committee, the resolution amended by the committee sub, Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Representative Branscombe.
Yes.
Representative Bridges. Representative Dixon.
Yes.
Representative Elliott. Representative Fleming.
Aye.
Representative Hale.
Yes.
Representative Heffron.
Yes.
Representative Hodgson.
Yes.
Representative Huff.
Yes.
Representative Imes.
Yes.
Representative Lewis.
Yes.
Representative McCool. Representative Neighbors.
Yes.
Representative Palumbo.
Yes.
Representative Roberts.
Yes.
Representative Smith. Yes. Representative Swan.
Yes.
Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Yes.
Representative Thomas.
Aye.
Representative Upchurch.
Yes.
Representative Wesley. Representative Williams.
Yes.
Chairman Blanton.
Aye. Don't everybody run off. We still. Okay, I know everybody's anxious to get out of here. It's been long. House Joint Resolution 7 is reported with favorable expression with the committee substitute attached thereto. We have a motion on the title amendment by Representative Upchurch, second by Representative Dixon. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Title amendment is adopted. If there's nothing else then to come before this committee today,